For the person seeking a deeper meaning in life and still aboard with us in this Awakening series, it's time to begin considering the unsettling topic of what may or may not come after your last heartbeat. Remember one of the two questions we concluded with in the last video? It was this: where will I be 100 years from now? Not a small question, is it? Measured against that much deeper and more vital reflection for any human being is the typical shallow and empty philosophy handed out by so much of the world today. I was especially impacted by a classic example of that recently at a supermarket checkout stand. The magazine staring at us there would have to hold the most classic illustrations of our shallow and secular culture. Here's what the minor celebrity highlighted in this particular magazine had to say on the cover. Quote, "For my life, I've decided to just be me," unquote. But I kept thinking, what if just being her isn't so good? It reminds me of one of my favorite cotton candy fluff advertising messages of a few years back. Nike Shoes came out with this less than profound piece of advice: you be you. However, what they failed to do was to follow up with any constructive advice as to what someone was to do if he or she wasn't happy being them. In any case, those who try to pad their lives with this kind of foggy philosophical coaching are, I'm afraid, sadly adrift in a sea of confusion aboard a rudderless ship going nowhere. Contrast that with a much more meaningful and encouraging quote by someone who transcended all our questionable earthly wisdom. He said this: "I have come so that they may have life and have it to the full." This generates other critical questions like, is there really an afterlife? And if so, what kind of evidence could there be of such an afterlife? Also, what is going to happen to me, or where will I possibly be 1 second after my death? These would appear to be sensible questions to be asked by any open or sincere seeker of truth. Truth regarding things lying beyond the normal reality of day-to-day living, that is. What if there truly is an afterlife? Further, what if the critically important decision of where you will spend eternity in that afterlife is a decision you must make before death? Put a bit more bluntly, what if there really is a payday someday? Do you see where questions like where I will be after I die leave the skeptic? He or she is faced with the blunt, sometimes run from, reality of the 50-50 choice. Here's where we need to consider a guy named Blaise Pascal.
Pascal's Wager, look it up in a Google search. It was posited by this 17th century Christian philosopher. Pascal suggested a type of bet, a kind of eternal gamble which centered on a key point, that being the possibility that the profound teachings and claims of Jesus Christ recorded in the Bible could be true. If so, Pascal reasoned, skeptics suffer a profound loss on their critically important 50-50 bet as to whether or not there is accountability after death concerning the way they lived their lives. Why? Simply because Christ clearly warned of a judgment to come for those who chose what he called the broad road leading to destruction. So, if the skeptic loses his bet and finds out only too late after death that Christ's claims and warnings were accurate, he loses everything forever. That would seem to be a horribly risky bet. Beyond life-changing, how much more important would an eternity-changing truth be? So, being willing to gamble on this 50-50 bet seems to many of us to be an eternally dangerous chance to take.
Well, perhaps it's now time for us to ask you to make an assumption. It's one you may never have seriously thought of doing before. We would simply ask you to consider the facts supporting what is widely thought to be the most unique and influential book of the last nearly 2 millennia, the Bible. If you're willing to take a look, you will find it is a clear account of history and spiritual truth, which also happens to contain undeniably precise prophecies. In it, you obviously can discover answers for all of the life and the afterlife questions we've been posing in this series so far. You will not, however, have to make a huge leap into the dark to accept this. It will simply require only a small hop of faith into truth-based evidence. I'd simply ask you to consider the possibility that God did not intend for people to check their minds at the door in order to believe what the Old and New Testaments in the Bible lay out. By contrast, the revered ancient texts of virtually every world religion are contaminated by myth, legend, fantasy, and distortion. But here the Bible stands out as a strong tower, utterly unique in accuracy and truth. Any honest seeker will find that the truths the Bible declares are firmly embedded in verifiable history. Listen, there comes a time that we must think it through. Would you come to the point where you'd be willing to consider that the Bible, perhaps just maybe, could possibly somehow be from God? The Bible is shown over centuries to be radically and powerfully different from every other religious book or collection of books. Would you be willing to give God the benefit of the doubt? Yes, I said God, not merely the Bible, because, and here comes one of the foundational what ifs for this awakening series. What if God, who is eternal, has all knowledge, is powerful enough to create his universe and everything alive in it? What if this God actually loved his fallen creatures? What if he decided to focus his wishes, goals, and plans into the minds of certain humans he selected? Would you be willing to consider that he is powerful enough to do that? Further, what if these people in ancient times then wrote as they were inspired because they were led by an all-knowing, all-powerful God? Well, this is what the Bible really represents. There are hundreds of examples in the Bible's 66 books where the writer says things like, God said, or then I heard the Lord. The Bible is thoroughly laced with these kinds of statements. This represents a form of solid evidence. The Old Testament ancient scrolls, so meticulously preserved and copied by Jewish scribes down the centuries, are powerful eyewitness testimonies to the special visitation of the universe's creator to a chosen group of his created beings.
Jerusalem is known as the ancient city. All of this special city, as well as the whole country of Israel, are sources for rich archaeological finds from ancient Bible times. One of the most well-known of these is the incredible find of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the last century. Studies of the scrolls by experts over the last 7 decades have been shown to buttress the truth and accuracy of many of the Old Testament books in modern Bibles. Additionally, there are over 5,000 New Testament full and partial manuscripts available to researchers via archaeological finds and from many old libraries in the Middle East and Europe. That's a huge amount of confirmation of the accuracy of the text. If you wanted, you could take the time to review many fine works by recognized scholars and also researchers in this field. They all will provide much in-depth research data that greatly expand the points we'll summarize in a moment. Here are just 3 outstanding reference examples. The first and possibly most compelling point supporting the Bible's uniqueness is accurately fulfilled prophecies. The Dead Sea Scrolls affirm many. Josh McDowell's quote sums it up. He said, "One of the unique and fascinating aspects of the Bible is that in no other religious literature do we find the accuracy of fulfilled prophecy. Biblical predictions recorded hundreds of years in advance of their happening are fulfilled in minute detail." The second proof point would have to be confirmation by external evidences, or in other words, non-biblical ancient texts. First century AD non-Christian writers, Suetonius, Josephus, Tacitus, and others, mentioned the person of Jesus Christ and referenced similar historical accounts written about in New Testament books. The third point is the compelling nature of the internal consistency of the Bible's 66 books. Harmony of doctrine, history, and spiritual themes are unrivaled in any ancient books written within the borders of a number of nations and over a time period of 100 years. The fourth and last point would certainly have to be the powerful archaeological evidences verifying biblical statements. We could mention especially the significant confirmation spanning the last 100 years of recent archaeological finds in the Middle East Bible lands. So, what would have to be our summary conclusion? The Bible is historically accurate. The evidence is there for any unbiased thinking person to confirm.
As we near the close of video 4, next to last in our Awakening series, maybe I can personalize this all a bit. Up until age 40, there were a lot of issues I didn't believe. Things about God, the Bible, and even about Jesus Christ. But my thinking was radically changed over a relatively short period of months back in 1987. And just to summarize here, I can bluntly tell you what I now firmly don't believe. First, I don't believe in a mindless nothing concept like chance, quote unquote, creating all of the mind-boggling intricacies and beautiful designs inherent in life all around me. I also don't believe God is out there somewhere but could care less about me. I don't believe God can't, or for some reason won't, intervene in a world He so beautifully has created. I also don't believe He is powerless to direct the minds of human beings He created to communicate His message to them if He wanted to. And yes, I believe He had wanted to. I also don't believe He's an evil or a sadistic God who would purposely give distorted truth or mix truth with legend and then laugh as we poor humans try to wrestle with sorting out fact from fiction. That's almost what I would think people have to believe if they think there's both truth and error in something like the Bible, which is, we believe, God's Word, of course. And then lastly, I don't believe that Jesus Christ was just another wise man or guru or a spiritual con who, unfortunately for him, ran afoul of his enemies and was then executed, his body just rotting away in some common criminal's graveyard. No, as a matter of fact, I won't believe any of those things, and neither should you. And why not? Well, because history, logic, and millions of lives changed for the better provide you with the concrete evidence to believe the Bible truly is God's Word to all people for all ages. Now the best way I can think of to close out this video is with some beautiful music. I'll match this to the appropriate verses. Enhancing these, enjoy the serene beauty of the lake where Jesus spent so much time among His people, Lake Galilee. Hope to see you back again for our 5th and closing video in this Awakening series.